Okay, so again, we're in chapter 20 of the book of Numbers, verse 12, 2012, and it's on page 885, 885 in the Eitz Chaim. But the Lord spoke to Moses and Aaron, saying, because you did not trust me enough to affirm my sanctity, we looked at this, therefore you shall not lead this congregation into the land. These are the waters of Meribah, meaning the Israelites had quarreled with the Lord, through which he affirmed his sanctity. And we looked last time also at a parallel story. And now we get to what looks like we are at the, let me just let Sandy in. Okay. So it looks like we are about to enter the promised land. People are about to journey in, and they are, good morning, Sandy. Sorry, it's been hard
Rabbi,
to get
sorry.
in.
Yeah, I had.
Not your fault. Not your fault.
Barbara saved the day for me.
Okay, so the people are about in verse 14 of chapter 20, about to hopefully pass into the promised land. And they are just about to enter Edom. Edom is an adjacent kingdom to the land of Canaan, the land that God had promised our ancestors. They're on their way in. They're about to get there. It is sort of south and east of the Dead Sea. So if you can imagine a map of Israel, this is the other side of the Jordan, right? Eventually, we'll see that some of the tribes will actually settle there and never cross the Jordan, which is a story we'll eventually come to. But now they are there, and Moses sends messengers to the king of Edom, right? And he begins with a kind of formal way. He says, Ko Amar, thus speaks Achicha Yisrael, your brother Israel, right? And it's really striking that he's calling this Edomite king your brother. But if you think back to the book of Genesis, who is the progenitor of Edom? It is Esau, right? Esau, who when he was first born, came out red and of course ruddy, and the word Edom means red, right? So here we have this sense, and of course Esau was the brother of Jacob, and we are Bnei Yaakov, the people of Jacob, the sons of Jacob, also known as Israel. So Moses says to the king of Edom, hey, we're your brethren, right? And you know the hardships that have befallen us. You must have heard of the terrible things that we have gone through, right? He's pleading. He's kind of, I'm your brother. I've had a hard time, right? And our ancestors went down to Egypt, and we were there for a long time, and the Egyptians dealt harshly with us and our ancestors. And we cried to the Lord, and he heard our plea, and he sent a messenger who freed us from Egypt, right? So it's an interesting statement that he sent a messenger. And if you look at the Hebrew, you'll see that the word messenger here is a malach, right? A malach is not just a messenger, but we would say an angel. Sent an angel to lead us forth. Now, I have to say, since Pesach is now, 6 weeks away, something like that? No, more than that, but it's coming. If you remember your Haggadah, you'll remember, somebody is waiting to come in. Okay. So we'll give Saul a minute to to make his way in. All right, so sorry about this. It's such a crazy day. He's having trouble getting in, but okay. All right, so they are there at the border of Edom, and they are, you know what? I think at this point, I'm going to change my view now that I can see who is in. Give me one second. Yeah, okay. So now I'm on speaker view, which will be better for those who are watching on the video. Saul, I'm glad you could join us. I'm sorry that it was so hard to get in. It's been a technical problem this morning. So where we are is beginning with verse 14, chapter 20. Moses has sent an emissary to the king of Edom. Thus says your brother Israel, you know the hardships that have befallen us. Our ancestors went down to Egypt. We dwelt in Egypt for a long time. They dealt harshly with us. We called out to the Lord. He heard our plea. He sent a messenger, a malach, an angel, to free us from Egypt. Now, the problem is not here in the text. The problem is the Passover Haggadah. If you remember, God took us out of Egypt not by a messenger. It's specific in the Haggadah that it's not by a messenger, not by an angel, right? So the question is, what do we make of this? Really not here. But what does the Haggadah, why does the Haggadah specifically say in contradiction to this text, which the compilers of the Haggadah, which is just based on Midrash, which is rabbinic, which is much later, how could they say not by an angel, not by a messenger? And I think there are two things going on in the Passover Haggadah. The first is that to the extent that we refer to this person as a messenger, who is the messenger? It's Moses, who God sends to do the work of bringing the people out of Egypt. And the emphasis in the Haggadah is strikingly not on Moses. Moses is not mentioned.
He's not mentioned
in the Haggadah, not mentioned in the Haggadah at all, right? Because the Haggadah wants to emphasize that it is God who brought us out of Egypt. To a certain extent, we can say about the Haggadah that it is a kind of, the Passover Seder is a kind of testimonial dinner for God, as we recount all the things, the many things that God did for us. You see that specifically in Dayenu. If God had not done this, but not that, it would have been enough, but God did this, and that would have been enough, and so on, right? So it's all about God, and we don't want to focus on the idea that there was some kind of messenger. The messenger is not important. The messenger is just an instrument. The angel is just an extension of God, really, right? It's not something independent, right? So it's not really a problem here. I would also note that what Maimonides does with this, the Guide for the Perplexed, Maimonides' great work of philosophy, is in part a way of dealing with what are difficult texts. It was actually written to one of his students, who was the perplexed in that title, right? To say, here are some of the contradictions or problems that you might have, not just between the scripture and the tradition, but also problems you might have between the Aristotelian worldview, right? Maimonides believes that Aristotle was a great sage, and the Bible. At any rate, what Maimonides says here is, what it says, not by an angel, what it really means is not by some natural occurrence. That God used God's own means, not through the ordinary course of the world, but something more than that. There's not a coincidence. That's Maimonides' take. Any way you look at this, what Moses is saying is he's kind of downplaying it. He says, well, God sent a messenger and that messenger took us out. And now we're in Kadesh on the border of your territory. He says, allow us then to cross your country. And the Hebrew here is navrana, right? The then is please. Please let us, right? It's a request. And it's a request from your brother, right? So what is your brother asking you? Let us pass through to cross the country. We will not pass through fields or vineyards. And we won't drink water from the wells. We will follow the king's highway, turning off neither to the right or the left until we cross your territory, right? Just let us go through. There's a main road that runs all down the Middle East in this part, goes down to Egypt, goes up actually to Lebanon, to Syria. It's a very well-known route. We're going to stay on that. Right? We're not going to bother you. We're just making our way to the promised land, and that's why God brought us out of Egypt. So Edom, the king of Edom, doesn't like this. You will not pass through us, or we will go out against you with the sword, right? So Edom refuses, the king of Edom refuses to let the Israelites pass through his territory. Then Moses, the Israelites continue, well, we'll keep to the beaten track, right? Emphasizing it again. And if we or our cattle drink you water, we will pay for it, right? So the last time he said, we won't drink your water. Now he says, well, if we drink your water, we'll pay for it. In other words, I think, and most of the commentaries, including Rashi, emphasize this, right? This will be a good deal for you financially, right? First, we just asked you as our brother to let us pass through, but okay. So we will allow you, we will buy your water and you'll make out, and we won't eat any of your crops and we'll just go through. But what happened? Edom says, you will not pass through. Edom goes out against them in heavy force, strongly armed. So Edom would not let Israel cross their territory, and Israel sets off away from them, right? So this attempt to enter the promised land is thwarted. Eventually, they'll have to fight Edom, but not yet. Setting out for Kadesh, from Kadesh, they arrive at Har Hahor, the mountain Hor. This apparently is an important mountain. No other mountain is described like the mountain. You don't say the mountain Sinai, right? Sinai mountain. Somehow this mountain has great stature. Actually, before we go there, I do want to give anyone who has one, I'm just going to change the view here. If anyone has a question before we go on about this war with Moab, with Edom rather, any questions at all? Or about what I said about the Haggadah before we move on. Okay. Yeah, so go ahead.
I think later on, I don't know if it's in Masai or it's in Devarim, it says don't do any evil to Edom because Edom is your brother, and the same thing with Moab. Okay. So
well, no, actually, there is this. The Moabites are really, for reasons that we'll see, really don't. There is no sense of that. Remember that we'll see this when we get to Bilam. But so what's the consequence? A Moabite may never enter the community of Israel, right? And that brings us to a problem, of course, with Ruth, who is a Moabite. But that's another story, right? So no, I think Moab does not get that kind of, positive view. But we'll come to it. Hannah, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I'm wondering if there is any of the maps in the back of our Siddur would show us, the paths that they were
Right.
taking. I'd love to visualize where they were.
Right, so there is a map at the back of Eitz Chaim. You could take a look at it. I think there is anyway.
There are several.
Yeah, so if you look at, well, here, if you look at Israel in Canaan, that map, which is, well, even the first one, the first map, it's right after page 1512.
Mhm.
The land of Canaan, Abraham to Moses, you can see exactly where Moab is.
Mhm.
And Edom, which we're going to come to, right? So there you have a sense of what we're talking about. Okay. All right. If there are no more
They're
questions,
south of that. They're south, right? Before they pass. they were
it is on the other south and on the other side of the Dead Sea.
south. Uh-huh.
Okay. So I'm just going to change the view back. And so they get to Mount Hor, and God says to Moses and Aaron, let Aaron be gathered to his kin, right? This is a euphemism for dying, right? It's time for Aaron to die. Why? He is not to enter the land that I assigned to the Israelite people because you disobeyed my command at the waters of Meribah. So I mentioned last time when we read that story that Aaron doesn't seem to have as much of a role there. It is Moses who yells at the people, Moses who strikes the rock instead of speaking to them, Moses who reacts in anger. Yet Aaron, neither one of them is going to enter the promised land, but Aaron seems less culpable, and the commentaries, and I think someone mentioned this last week, actually, Aaron does not intercede. And that seems to be the problem here. Moses will be around for a while because he has to lead the people up to the land. And unlike Aaron, Moses will get to see the end of the journey. He won't get into the land, but he will be able to gaze upon it. And the rabbis say this is really quite a lovely midrash. So if you think back to the creation of the world in 7 days, on the first day there is light, right? God said, let there be light, there's light. And then when we come around to the fourth day, we get the sun, the moon, and the stars. So what's that light from the first day? The only light we know about in the world comes from the sun, the moon, and the stars. So there's a lovely midrash which says God stored that light away for the righteous, and that Moses on the brink of the promised land was granted a vision of the land using that mystical light of the first day. So Moses is going to make it, at least to the edge, but not Aaron. So take Aaron and his son, Eleazar, bring them up on Mount Hor, strip Aaron of his vestments, put them on his son, Eleazar. There Aaron will be gathered to the dead, right? So this is really quite a striking ceremony. All of his priestly garments are to be removed and literally placed on his son. And I think here there is something lovely about this. Not only do we have continuity in the priesthood, but Aaron, in a weird way, gets to see the end of the journey because he sees his son, literally stands there when his son takes on that role. Right?
Mm.
He sees a certain fulfillment that will take place through this continuity. And I think, on the other hand, it's striking that Aaron isn't the one who takes off his clothing and dresses his son. Now, it may be difficult to do anyway. Like, he takes off the breastplate, where does he put it, right? Nonetheless, I think there is a sense that's a step too far, to ask him to divest himself of his garments. I've mentioned this phrase, gathered to his people, before. We see it in a number of places. The view of the afterlife, the biblical view, and later on, we have other visions of what happens to us after death. But the biblical view is that after you die, you go to Sheol, the underworld, not a great place to be, but you're also together with your family. There's that sense that you are gathered to your kin. So Moses goes up as God commanded. They go on Har Hor in the sight of the community. Moses strips Aaron of his vestments, puts them on his son Eleazar, and Aaron died there on the summit of the mountain. Moses and Eleazar come down from the mountain. The community then knows that Aaron has died, and they mourn him. The house of Israel bewails him for 30 days. So here Moses, now having lost his sister, has now lost his brother as well. And when we talked about the death of Miriam, I took note of the fact that when Miriam dies, there doesn't seem to be a reaction. We don't hear about the people mourning Miriam, but here with Aaron, they not only mourn him, but they mourn him for a month. Traditionally, mourning had been a week. This is a full month. And so how does one account for that? And what the rabbinic tradition says about Aaron is that Aaron was the classic peacemaker, that Aaron was always trying to make peace between people, right? The Pirkei Avot says, advises people that they should be disciples of Aaron, right? Pursuing peace and bringing people closer to God, right? Aaron's role as the priest, of course, brought people closer, although the rabbis say bring closer to Torah, but it's sort of a translation of that idea into their own world. But he is, and there are stories about Aaron in the Midrash, going from, if two people are fighting with each other, he goes to one and he says the other one wants to make up with you, and then he goes to the second one and says the first one wants to make up with you. And he is always trying to make peace. So much so, of course, that we see it in extreme, right, with the golden calf. Right? And we can talk about that and how bad it is. But he's also trying to, in some sense, appease the people, help the people, maybe delay them a little bit till Moses gets down, right? So it's very striking that they mourn him, and literally the language here is weep for him, weep for him, and I think also perhaps weeping for their own predicament. Now there's no longer Miriam, there's no longer Aaron. Aaron was the spokesman too. He was that intermediary in a lot of ways, right? He was the one who spoke. Moses would speak to Aaron, Aaron would speak to Pharaoh, for example. Okay, once again, I'm going to change the view. And any questions or comments about this? Go ahead, Myra. Please unmute. Go ahead.
Okay. My question is, where is Mount Hor?
Yeah, so I don't know where Mount Hor is. It's a good question. Let me see if there's anything in the commentary about it here. It does not, no, I don't see anything. And let me just check one other commentary I've been working on to see if it says anything there. And I don't see anything.
There's a commentary in Hertz.
Yeah, what does Hurt say?
It came unto Mount Hor, literally came unto Hor, the mountain. The site is stated to be by the border of the land of Edom and in the edge of the land of Edom, northeast of Kadesh, and a day's journey from the Dead Sea.
Okay, certainly it's close to Kadesh because we've actually will have that mentioned. But you know, okay, that's good. I don't know where to put that on a map.
I was just wondering if it's a present day mountain somewhere.
Yeah, I'm not aware of, you know, these biblical mountains in general. There are exceptions. There Mount Tabor, which is mentioned later in the Bible, we know exactly where that is. We know where Carmel is, Mount Carmel. We know where Har Habayit is, the mountain where the temple was built, right? But most of the mountains we don't know. We don't know where Mount Sinai was. There is a tradition and a mountain that in Arabic is called Mount Musa, from Moshe, right? From Moses's mountain. But there's no, actually, you know how they determined where Mount Sinai was? There was a Christian queen, Catherine, who journeyed through the Promised Land at one point and identified all kinds of places that she felt for whatever reason. She identifies Mount Sinai. She identifies the place of the burning bush at the base of Mount Sinai. Because remember in the Bible, I don't know if you remember, but in the Bible, God says to Moses at the burning bush, you will come back to this place, right? So she says, oh, that's the burning bush. And they built a monastery at the base of what she said was Mount Sinai. And it's called Santa Caterina, right? Saint Catherine, right? So a lot of these places we have legends about. We know the Tower of David in Jerusalem was not where the city of David was. We know that there are places that are ascribed by tradition to various prophets. There's a tomb of Samuel, probably not where Samuel was buried, right? So these are later descriptions. We don't really know. I'm not aware of anyone who knows which mountain is Hor. Sandy, unmute, please.
While you were, I Googled that and it says, where is Mount Hor today? And it says at a height of 4,780 feet, the mountain is situated in the Edomite Mountains in Petra, Jordan, also known as Jabal Haron. A shrine has been built at the summit, which claims to cover the grave of Aaron. Yeah,
okay. Fair enough. I'm still questioning it because, you know, we don't know how reliable these traditions are. But good. Yes, Hannah.
Yeah, I just wanted to note the plaque for Nahum to honor him said, be a disciple of Aaron, love people and draw them near to Torah. Which is,
right.
That's our copy of it.
Right,
So,
right. I remember
very
that.
special to me.
So yes, right. So here Aaron is beloved. At any rate, Aaron is now gone. And now we continue with the people's attempt to get to the promised land. We're now at the beginning of chapter 21. We're just going to get a little bit further today. Okay. The Canaanite king of Arad, who dwelled in the Negev. By the way, we know where Arad is. At least there's a modern day city in Israel called Arad in the Negev. Learned that Israel was coming by way of Atharim, and he engaged Israel in battle and took some of them captive. Right? Israel then made a vow to the Lord, right? If you will deliver this people into our hand, we will prescribe their towns. And God heeded Israel's plea, delivered up the Canaanites, and they and their cities were prescribed. And the place was known as Hormah, from the word cherem. Cherem is prescribed. So what is cherem? And I think we've talked about this before, but I'll mention it again. Cherem is a ban, and the ban here is on not being allowed to take any spoils. Everything has to be destroyed. Right? There can't be any financial gain. You help us and help us to survive this people who is attacking us. That's all we want. We're not interested in financial gain. We see this idea of cherem again and again in the Bible. Later, the term is used for excommunication, someone who is cut off from the community, something that exists today, even in some ultra-Orthodox Haredi communities, where someone is put under a ban. Cherem is the term. Okay, so what we have here then is a very strange story, really strange. And we'll go through that quickly, okay? They set out from Mount Hor by the way of the Sea of Reeds to skirt the land of Edom, but the people grew restive on the journey and spoke against God and Moses. And here we go again, right? Here we go again, same thing. Why did you make us leave Egypt to die in the wilderness? There's no bread, no water. We have come to loathe this miserable food. It's the same old story. They're just not happy. You know, we want to go to a different restaurant. We don't like this. Right? You know, there was a famous joke about Jackie Mason, who always used to tell these jokes about Jews and Gentiles. And he says, you know, you come out of the theater and the non-Jew says, let's get a drink. And the Jew says, where are we going to eat? Right? And there is this sense, right, throughout the beginning with the Garden of Eden, right, and the fruit, right, that it's all, we're very food involved as a people going all the way back. At any rate, they are dissatisfied. And the Lord sends serpents, serpents against the people, seraphim. It's interesting, the same word, seraphim, is used for these beings that guard God's throne. And there are those who think that they have some snake-like quality. At any rate, God punishes the people by sending these seraphims, and they bite the people, and many of them die. So they come to Moses and they say, we have sinned by speaking against the Lord and you. Intercede with the Lord to take these serpents away. God intercedes, so God prays, that's intercession. God intercedes with the Lord for the people. And the Lord says to Moses, make a seraph figure, put it on a standard, and anyone who is bitten, if they look at it, they will recover. So Moses makes a copper serpent and mounted it on a staff. And when anyone was bit by the serpent, they would look at the copper serpent and they would recover, right? And by the way, how do you say copper serpent? Nachash nachoshet. You hear the pun, the play on words, right? And it also, nachoshet. You can see the snake, right?
Alliteration.
It's both auditory, right? And it's also a play on words, a copper's servant. Now, this is very odd, right? That somehow, oh, by the way, you know that symbol, the physician's symbol, that staff, it comes from here,
Mhm.
right? That healing staff that we see as a symbol of medicine. At any rate, how is it? It seems like magic, right? You look at the staff and suddenly you're healed. Rabbis don't like it. Maimonides certainly doesn't like it. They say, oh no, it's just that they lift their eyes towards the heavens, right? I lift my eyes towards the heavens, the psalmist says, from where will my help come? My help will come from God, right? So it's not, though I think in the Torah it seems to be, it's not sympathetic magic. Later Jewish tradition doesn't like that whole idea. This seraph now becomes a kind of sacred object. And it carried with the people, and it seems to have existed until the reign of King Hezekiah. Because Hezekiah is a guy who, much later, one of the kings of Israel, and he initiates a kind of religious reform and revival. And one of the things he does is he destroys this seraph, this serpent, this copper serpent, which had been with the Israelites ever since, because he was afraid that it would become an object of veneration. There's a note in Eitz Chaim, I'll just read it to you. The anti-idolatry reforms, it's at the bottom of the page. King Hezekiah destroyed Moses's bronze serpent because it had become an object of veneration. Religion often runs the risk of having people ascribe holiness to one of God's instruments, losing sight of the God to whom it points, right? And I read that and I was struck by it because in some ways that's the fear that we have around the Torah scroll, right? That somehow the scroll, it's, I'm sorry?
Can you mute everybody? I'm hearing-
Oh, yeah, sure. Thanks. Let me do that.
Yeah, 2:30 yeah, that probably would be better. We appreciate it. Thank you so much. I appreciate so. See you later. Okay, thank you.
Rabbi, you're muted now.
I'm having tremendous technological problems today. I'm so sorry. Okay. Just give me one more second and I will try to, yeah. Okay, so the comment reminded me of the Torah scroll, right? If you were, I don't know, if you were from Mars and you came down and you looked at Jews, somebody from another planet, you're going to a synagogue and you'd say, oh, they're worshiping that scroll. There's people stand up when they see the scroll, they kiss it when the scroll is brought around and so on. And I think part of the liturgy that we use around the Torah service actually is an attempt to somehow undermine that possibility. So what do we say when we take the Torah out, right? We say Shema. There's only one God. This is not the God, right? We talk about the Torah as something that God gave to Moses in that service, right? There is none like you, oh God, ein kamocha, right? That's how we start the Torah service, right? Nothing else is like you, right? Because there is that idea that something that is used for a sacred purpose, something that's connected to God, can itself become an object of worship. Hezekiah is so concerned about that he has this serpent destroyed. Archaeologists actually in the Negev, down at Timnah, which is down near Eilat, actually found a bronze serpent among other items there. So there was a lot of life to this object and to this idea. And the Egyptians, I think, worshipped. There was a snake god in Egypt. You'll see that in some of the hieroglyphics and other things. So ironically, of course, Cleopatra is struck by an asp. Be that as it may. We have this sort of strange story, and then they're going to continue their journey and meet one obstacle after another. They go from there, they go to Ovot, and then they go from Ovot, and they come to Iye HaIvarim, and they wind up at Moab, and they come and they encamp at a place called Wadi Zered, and so on. So we're going to get now a progression of places. And then next time, we're going to see something really quite striking, which is a series of poems that come from a non-biblical book. And the book is called the Sefer Milchamot Adonai, the book of God's wars. Right? It seems to be a book of poetry. It exists at the time of the biblical account, right? The person who's narrating this says, oh, you can, if you want to know more about these wars, check out the book of the wars of the Lord. Now, we don't have this book anymore. This is a kind of cross-reference. We have some small selections of it. So next time I want to talk a little bit about that, and I'll also talk a bit about other books that are outside of the canon, right? What we would consider biblical books. Some of them, this one's just lost, but there are others as well, and how something became part of the Bible and how it didn't. So we'll look at that next time. We just have a couple of minutes left. It changed the view. Any questions on anything today at all before? Yeah, Saul and then Sandy.
Yeah, this may sound like a silly question, but the Seraph, the Nachash, the snake, he didn't revive the ones who had already died. He revived the ones that were
Right.
dead, right? Okay.
Right. Yes. No, and I think it's we don't have in Torah a sense of resurrection. In any sense. The sense seems to be once you're dead, you're dead. Now, when you're dead, you go down to Sheol, where you continue to exist, right? So it's, there is an afterlife and you go there. It's possible we have a story with Saul, King Saul, in which he brings back, he goes to a necromancer and she brings back the prophet Samuel, who's not at all happy about being brought back, right? So, but the idea that someone who is dead can actually be revived and continue to live in the land of the living is not an idea that we see here in the Torah at all. So you can heal. We seem to see it with Elijah and Elisha later on, where a child dies and they seem to bring that child back. Whether the child was really, there are arguments both ways, but I think the simple meaning of the text is that in prophetic text, you do see it. In Torah text, you don't. Sandy, go ahead.
So Rabbi, the people have been complaining all along, and why all of a sudden, there was no warning that all of this one time, why did the serpents come? Nothing happened before.
Right. So, I can't help but see sequence. Right? And, so they've been complaining and there've been punishments and so on. But here, Aaron, this beloved figure, has just died, right? And so we're back, their sense of vulnerability, right? Their discontent seems to come back to the surface again. There's this sense that the people are constantly trying God in the wilderness, time and time again. That's the story of the book of Numbers, really. And it's in many ways, it's a tragic story. It's certainly tragic for Moses and Aaron and Miriam, but it's a tragic story. I don't know much more to say about that. This is a variant, right? We get the snakes, we've had plagues, we've had other things. And this seems to be much more generalized. It's again, the fetching over food. But again, blaming God, blaming Moses. Okay, any other comments? Sure. Okay, one last question. I'll ask this again next time because a lot of us are not here. I'm thinking of setting up some kind of, I'm not quite sure what form it would take, some place where if people want to make comments or ask questions in between classes, you could go. And then I would reply and everybody would see the reply. Because sometimes people ask great questions and then I answer them, but I don't generally bring it back. So, or if you just want to share thoughts, some kind of group chat or Facebook group, and so I'll bring it up again next time. If people are interested, I'll set it up. And if not, that's fine too. Okay, so in the meantime, we are out of time. I will see you all next week. I promise you a better link. You'll have it at the very beginning. I'm going to go back and revamp it, and I don't know what happened, but I apologize again and want to wish you a great week. Have a good week, everybody. Happy President's Day and everything else.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye now.
Thank you. Same to you, Grandma.